let's start with us first. Lisa, can you tell us what are some of the benefits of pre-dental ASDA?
Yes, let me unmute myself here. So hello, everyone. My name is Luisa, and ASDA is kind of our biggest student organization in our universities. So similar to what pre-dental societies offer undergraduate students, ASDA is kind of that for us. So a lot of workshops, a lot of help in terms of getting through dental school. So what does that mean for pre-dents is that you guys can also be part of ASDA as a pre-dental membership. And it's just something that looks really great on your application because there's a lot of benefits that you can get for being an ASDA member before you're even in dental school. So if you go onto their website, the ASDA website, you'll see they have a lot of great resources about dental schools and how to get in and different parts of your applications. So definitely something that I would consider. Maybe just look at the website and see what they have to offer and to learn more about ASDA.
Siri, what are some of the things to avoid in your personal statement? Let's start with that.
So you don't want to waste your personal statement talking about things that the interviewers will see in other parts of your application. So you don't want to talk about your grades. You don't want to talk about any like random extracurriculars that you don't really have anything extra to say about them than just the fact that you participated in them, or like if you did really great in a certain class, that's fantastic and they'll see that elsewhere. But you really want to use your personal statement as a chance to highlight personal aspects and things that are or that you are really passionate about that the interviewers would not have otherwise seen. And you don't really just want to try to look at what they're looking for. When you tailor it more toward what you are passionate about and what you want them to know about you, it comes across as way more genuine. So focus on anything that you want them to know about you that you were not able to really talk about anywhere else in your application.
Louisa, could you tell me what's the best way to ask for a letter of recommendation from someone?
Yeah, so for the letter of recommendation, I would say the biggest advice is just give yourself time. Kind of warm up to the professor early on. The advice that I was given is ask them around spring break of the year that you're applying. Because that really gives you about 2 months until application cycle opens. You can email with them, you can, not now because of Corona, but in a regular cycle, you can go and talk to them. And so, yeah, just give the time to build up the relationship, and then you'll feel more comfortable asking them to write you a letter.
So we have Trent here now. Hi, Trent.
Hi,
He's from Midwestern at the UNC. So we're very glad to have you guys all join us as panelists today. Natalie, how important is it to write a strong personal statement?
I would say that it's pretty important because this is what's going to set you aside from all the other applicants that are most likely very similar to you as far as grades and like their shadowing and things they've done. So you can use the personal statement to show your unique story and maybe use stories of why dentistry, not just say, I want to be a dentist because of this, but use stories about what you've done, and then also use this opportunity to kind of show and tell what you're wanting to do with your future in dentistry and why you would be good for the profession. Because I feel like, I don't know exactly how the admissions committees work because I know all schools are different, but I feel like if they were going off personal statements, maybe if yours is very generic or you don't really have anything unique, maybe they'll skip over and they'll be like, oh, I might come back to that one if I don't find other applicants with better grades and GPAs and things like that. That's my personal opinion.
What about committee letters versus individual letters of recommendations?
So I know all the dental schools might differ a bit in their requirements. So I'm actually a non-traditional applicant. I did use a committee letter my very first time applying, which was a long time ago. But I could also see committee letters being very generic, because I think at most undergrads, they interview you and then they kind of write a letter off of your grades and how you did in that interview with them. So it's really up to you. I mean, it does seem like it'd be easier to get a committee letter, but if you have the opportunity to get close with your professors and get to know them, I would definitely recommend that. But like I said, you do want to check the requirements of the different dental schools you're applying to.
Okay, so who should we ask the letter of recs from, Louisa?
So your AdSAS application is going to have room for 4 personal statements. So you can use a maximum of 4. And I do highly recommend that you submit all 4 of those optional letters. So the first one is going to be from a dentist. So that is preferably somebody that you've shadowed before. Maybe you just build up a good relationship. Maybe it's your dentist that you've been able to kind of have more of a personal connection with. So that one's a very important letter just to show that you have in fact seen a little bit of dentistry and you've spent some time in an office. The second and third letter, those are both going to be from science professors. That does not necessarily mean biology. You can ask physics, chemistry, and so on. Somebody that hopefully, well, first of all, hopefully you've got a pretty good grade in the class. Doesn't have to be an A+. I asked for a letter from somebody that I got a B in the class, but I felt a very personal connection to the professor, and I thought that the professor would write a strong letter for me. And then the fourth letter is going to be somebody who can speak a little bit more on your character. Maybe the science professors will have a little bit more just of your academics and your grades. And then that fourth person can talk about who you are as an individual. So I would advise, make sure that person is somebody, not just like a family member or somebody that you're close with, but someone who has some rapport, who can write a very strong letter and kind of show who you are as a person.
So Siri, when we write personal statements, we have a lot of like extracurricular activities that we want to talk about to show who we are as an applicant. Which one should we talk about in our personal statement that would make our personal statement the most impactful?
I think the one that, if it was brought up during an interview, so a lot of schools do their interviews differently. I know Midwestern does it closed file, so they don't have any of your information with them when they're looking at it, but some other schools do open file. So if an interviewer were to look at your personal statement and say, hey, can you elaborate on this a little bit? Something that you can just freely speak about, and it doesn't seem like it's rehearsed, it doesn't seem like you're trying to say something that they want to hear. So I was able to sit in on a few panels this past year for our interviews because they had students in them. And a lot of times the students that made the biggest impact on the interviewers were the ones that had these personal stories, whether it was in dentistry or not, just anything that they had like community service wise, anything that they felt was like a defining moment in their childhood that like led them to dentistry. And it honestly doesn't even have to be about dentistry. It could be about anything, like a separate career you had that you may or may not have enjoyed, anything that led you to where you are now. So anything that you would be able to kind of expound upon if asked about it, and it comes across naturally, and just, yeah, make sure you're not trying to say what you think they want to hear, because they have a really good radar for stuff like that.
Okay. Natalie, now, Siri just went through like what's the best extracurricular things to put in our personal statement. Now, how much should we reflect on our life so that it doesn't just sound like I'm listing things off of the resume?
Definitely be honest. And I think I kind of already said this in a different way, but tell stories about how you got to where you are, maybe like obstacles you've had to overcome, and like I said, what you plan to do with your future in dentistry. And this could be based off, what you've had experience with in the past. So just kind of tie all those things together. And then you just want it to come across why you should be chosen for that school, why you stand out amongst others. And then, like I actually printed out my personal statement from my application, and I have it sitting at my desk. So I like to read over that and make myself proud. And I know that the admissions committee thought the same way. So just make yourself proud and don't just go off of what you've put on your application already, like a list.
Trent, who would be the best person to ask to read your letter of rec before you include it into your application?
Yeah, I would say for that, it's really people that know you the best. I think with the letters rec, oh wait, you said for your letters of rec?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Can't they not read your letters of recommendation? Or your personal statement, you mean?
Yeah, personal statement. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's okay. For your personal statement, I would say it's people that really know you the best, because your personal statement should really be about, who you are, really why you want to get into dental school, why you want to be a dentist. I mean, whatever way that you want to take it. But I think the biggest thing is just making it about you and really personal. So for me, I had people read it, family members, professors, people that really knew my story and about me, so that they can really critique it and say, hey, maybe that's not totally about you, or that doesn't reflect you correctly, and they can give you some good feedback on that.
Lisa, when we choose to write a personal statement, obviously we're sending it to multiple schools, right? How should we tailor our personal statement, and if we should tailor it to our ideal or top school that we're trying to apply to?
Yeah, I think you should have one strong personal statement and then use that for all of your application. I don't think that, your personal statement is kind of a canvas, and you're just painting a one-page picture of who you are. So you don't really want to show one school one side of you and then another school another side of you. It should be a complete picture of who you are, and that should be something that you're proud of to any school that you apply to. So I don't think I would change it, nor do I think that that's an option in the ASDA application. If I remember correctly, you upload your personal statement one time and it gets sent to all the schools that you selected on your ASDA. Janice, I think you're still muted.
Okay, so Trent, who are some of the peoples, and how do we develop good relationships with them so that we can get a letter of rec from them?
Yeah, I think it's really spending a lot of time with them. For myself, I asked different doctors, and then some of my professors, or people that I had went on, specific trips with. So I think it's really the more really quality time that you spend with people is the best way to get some people that will write you some good letters, people that really know you the best. So for me, I spent a lot of time with different doctors, but the one dentist that I actually asked was one that I grew up with. He knew me really well. I spent a lot of time with him in his clinic. So I felt really comfortable going to him in person and asking him, hey, can you write me a letter? And he, I didn't get to see it. But he did tell me he really reflected on who I am. And I think that's the best way is to ask people that really know you well. As far as professors, it's the same way. Professors that you know well and that you've spent a lot of time with. And I think asking professors that you have a good relationship with, because not everyone you're going to have a good relationship with. Unfortunately, you can't be on the good side of everyone. So really ask someone that is going to write you a good letter and that you really work well with.
So as far as there's a lot of students who attend universities that are huge, and sometimes they have TAs and they can't really communicate with their professors directly, what's the best way to reach out to those faculty, Siri?
So this is near and dear to my heart. I went to Ohio State and 60,000 undergrads. It was really easy to feel like you just kind of slip through the cracks. And this is where it is so important to start early and like figure out what classes you really enjoy, what professors you get along with. So I know a lot of the universities, some of the professors are really great and some of them are only there to do their research. So it's kind of pinpointing who you think you'll get along with, like Trent was saying, who you think you can build a strong relationship with and going from there. It's really hard because there's a lot of TAs in these classes and you don't get a lot of face time with the professors, but you just have to be really diligent with figuring out when their office hours are, being really good about going. I know it's hard when there's so many professors, so many TAs, so many classes, everything, but that's like so many great opportunities from going to a large university, but it's also hard to get your face known and your name known. So that is definitely important to start early. Couple weeks of starting the class. I know that's kind of hard to know if you enjoy the class or enjoy the professor, but kind of feel it out and then start going to their office hours so you're not just a face to them, and go to class. I know it's really easy to just not go to class and it's like watch things online, especially now. I mean, everything is online and it's harder, but that's just, yeah, it's definitely more important now than ever to make an impression on those professors and develop relationships.
And then for, there's a lot of non-traditional applicants who have graduated and decided to work or maybe like a career change, right? What is the best way to get a letter of recommendation and store it or something in, I guess, a platform so that they don't have to ask the professor again, or how to reach out to them after you've graduated? Louisa, can you answer that?
Yeah, so I actually just found out about this platform recently. It's called Interfolio, and it allows you to save exactly that, like that kind of information, either just contacts to professors, and also if they have written you a letter of recommendation, you can store that in the Interfolio and then use it multiple times. And so that way, if you say you're taking some community college classes and then later on you're taking some university classes, that's one good way to save it all together before you're getting ready to apply to dental school. So it's called Interfolio.
Okay, so we're gonna open it now, the time to ask questions. So if you guys can direct the questions into the Q&A, we're gonna discuss each one that you guys put in there. One of the first questions that we got was, let's see. If all schools have different requirements, some want 3 sciences and other ones a letter from your major, how do we fit all of them if they vary?
So a lot of times, the specific schools will have you send any like specific requirements that they have directly to them. So I know ASDA in Mesa, Arizona, they asked for a specific like volunteer advisor recommendation letter. So they asked you to send that one to them. I'm not sure exactly how the application still works, but I think as long as you get like the majority of the requirements that most schools are asking for, you can send any of those like kind of extraneous ones directly to the school. But that definitely wouldn't hurt to contact the admissions, because I'm sure they get the same question all the time if it's like if there's only a certain amount of spots, but more letters.
For reapplicants, should they use the same letter of recommendation?
You just opening this up to any of us, like any of us can just jump in and answer. Okay. So I applied 4 times before I got in. There were a couple of people that were the same, but I asked them each time to write, whether they wrote a new one or not each time, I'm not sure. But I did keep them updated on what I've improved. and ask them to write me a letter of recommendation. But then some throughout the years, because I applied between like 2011 to 2018. So obviously I gained new relationships with different types of people that could write me letters of recommendation. So I just would ask them if I had developed a relationship with them over someone in the past, if that makes sense. But the ones that I did continue to keep asking to write me letters of recommendation, I made sure to stay in touch with and let them know what I've improved upon.
So if we're like using, we're going to update like the letter rec, we're also going to update personal statements as well. How should reapplicants update their personal statement?
I almost think that you should start out with a clean slate. So much can happen in a year or two, or however much time it's been since the last time you applied. You might want to structure your essay completely different. And you might grow as a person and feel differently about writing, right? So I think instead of just kind of going back to edit it and insert kind of the new achievements, just start over. Obviously, don't forget about your past. You can still include the things that are important to you, but just start with this clean slate and kind of show who you are as a person in that moment, not a year or two ago.
Let's see. Louisa, I think you mentioned Interfolio. Are you familiar with how to submit letters onto the application using Interfolio? Is there a link in between?
I believe so. I've actually never used it myself, but from what I've been told, the person that you've received a letter from that is stored in Interfolio, you will have to send them a type of link, and then they're the ones that submit it. So I think there is still a communication between whoever you received the letter from, but it just makes it a little bit easier for you. Yeah, and then also to add, this is completely separate from ASDA. Right, so so in ASDA, you put in the email of the person you're asking the letter from. You also have the opportunity to write them a little blurb message. And then once you submit that, ASDA automatically contacts the professor or the dentist, wherever you're requesting it from, and then they will submit it to a third-party site that you never see. So you don't know what your letters look like. You don't know how they were submitted to each dental school. All you know is that in ASDA, it will say letter of recommendation received, and that's all.
Let's see. So when you're asking professors for a letter of rec, do you think it matters if it's from a professor who teaches at a community college?
I can answer this. I don't think it does. I think really, if you have a good relationship with the professor, then I think it really doesn't matter on where it is. As long as it's someone that really knows you well and would write you a good letter, I don't think it really matters whether it's at a community college or a junior college or a university.
Let me add in on that. So I actually had an experience with asking a community college professor to write me a letter, and there wasn't really an issue with it. It is dependent on the program itself. So I think it's very important if you reach out to the dental school that you're looking into applying to and speak to the director, speak to admissions, and ask them if it matters, like if they view it differently. But to my knowledge, there are some schools that do, but I still feel like it shouldn't, but that's not within our control. So yeah, definitely ask the school directly before you request the letter. And then, can a retired professor write and submit a letter of recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you had them as a professor and they did a great job teaching you and you had a connection and you learned from them, I don't see any reason why they don't still have that credibility. They may not have a university letterhead, but I think it's still, a valid description of who you are as a person, and you got a grade in that class and they can attest to that. So absolutely.
Is there an expiration date for letter of recommendations? And is it looked at unfavorably if a letter is 2 or 3 years old?
I'm not sure if there's any like actual expiration date. Do any of you guys know? I know the DAT expires after some like 3 to 5 years, but I'm not sure that there are any expirations for the rec letters. But that does beg the question, if you submit one that's 3 or 4 years old, it's kind of like, well, what were you doing in the meantime? So even if, say, you haven't been in school for 5 or 6 years, and then this could also tie into the question about a retired professor. Say the professor's not even teaching there anymore, but if you've like kept this relationship with them, and say you just like meet up for coffee and just catch up and like see where you are, and if you can have them like vouch for the fact that you have been doing things in the meantime, and yeah, just any sort of, it doesn't even have to be academic, the things that you've been doing in the past 3 or 4 years, but you do want to keep those academic connections. And even if you store those, the rec letters in Interfolio, it doesn't hurt to reach out to those previous professors and just say, hey, like, this is what I've been doing. Would you mind kind of updating it and like speaking to the fact that I have been doing stuff for the past few years?
Can a bad letter of recommendation harm your application?
I would definitely say so. And that's why I don't remember who gave me this advice, but whenever you're asking someone to write you a letter of recommendation, make sure you specifically say, like, you know, let them know what you're asking for and say, can you write me a strong, positive letter of recommendation? And that way they'll be able to give you a straight answer instead of just saying, can you write me a letter of recommendation? Well, sure, if they want to, and write you a bad one. But so I would just be very specific when asking, can you write me, do you feel that you could write me a strong, positive letter of recommendation?
And then for letter of recommendations that we request from science professors, can that science course be psychology or another soft science? And is this, let's see, like, would it affect us in any way if it's not like the basic BCP, like biochem and physics professors?
So I can answer that from UNLV. I know the admissions committee at UNLV wants to see a hard science. And the reason being is that, you know, those classes tend to be a little bit more difficult. And the whole purpose of a letter of recommendation from a science professor is just to gauge, are you able to handle the rigorous curriculum in dental school? And I'm sure there's many rigorous psychology classes and so on, but they don't necessarily know that. Right? It's just historically, it's been more difficult to take a biology class or a chemistry class. And so that kind of gives you the credibility to say, hey, this person got a good grade in this hard class. They will be able to do well in dental school. So in my opinion, I think it should be one of your harder science classes that you got a good grade in.
Here's a question about personal statements. Should our focus be why we chose dentistry or the obstacles that we overcame in life?
So I think in almost every interview, at some point, the question why dentistry comes up. It's just one of those things that everybody wants to get the answer on that they're interviewing you for. So you're going to have the chance to speak about that regardless, but something that you went through or like overcame or like adversity that you faced is not necessarily going to come up in your interview. So your main goal in this whole cycle is to maximize how much you can say about yourself in the shortest amount of time in like the most concise way possible, because you don't have a lot of like opportunities to interact with these professors. So they get your application and then they see you at the interview. So that being said, if you can tie the two together, that would be fantastic, because they're saying, or then you would be saying, like, these are the things that I went through in my life. These are the difficulties that I faced. And then this is how I overcame them to come to dentistry, or this is like what set me on the path to be a dentist, or even if it was in your path to being a dentist. So I think that would be a really strong letter if you were able to combine the two of those, because they would get to have like a pretty good picture of you as a person.
And I know Siri mentioned adversity as well that we overcame. And I think there are a lot of applicants too who are like, well, what if I never overcame an adversity, right? Like, does it always have to be something that's negative? And personally, I don't feel like it has to be something that's negative. It could be something that you learned. Like if you went on a mission trip, if you volunteered at a dental office, or if you even volunteered at a local event, like if you're from California, CDA Cares, right? That can be something that you experience that could lead you towards dentistry. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you overcame. Let's see.
Can I add one more point to the personal statement? So for UNLV specifically, so your word cutoff in ASDA is 4,500 words. That's a little bit, counted a little bit different than a Word document. So just make sure you copy and paste it so you know how many words it's actually going to be. Now, the advice that I was given for UNLV was don't write a personal statement longer than 1 page in a Word document. Which in my case was a lot less than the 4,500 words. So I actually had a 1.5 pages and then showed it to a professor at the dental school well before I applied, and he said, cut it down. It has to be less than a page on Google or on a Word doc, which then will look completely different in your ASDA application because the PDF, the way that they shrink it down, will be different. So just keep that in mind. You're going to want to be extremely concise with your words. You're going to cut out many, many things that you thought you would want to include. And so you really have to prioritize how you want to word it.
This person asked if they are not good at writing stories, how do they make their personal statement stand out?
I would say just be you, right? That's all they want to see. If you're going to have somebody on the internet or somebody at your local writing center write your personal statement for you, and it sounds like Shakespeare, great, but the dental school will know, right? They will know that that's not genuinely you. So I'm not a super creative writer. My writing process was I just took my time. I took about a month or so to write my personal statement. I had about 10 edits, and then I just slept over it night after night. And then I would change little things the next day and then show it to lots and lots of different people. I did bring it to the writing center at my university just to see what they would say, but I didn't have them write it for me in words that I wouldn't use naturally. So yeah, just give yourself time. Sleep over it, change it little by little, and in the end, it'll be a product that represents you and not what one other person thinks of you or somebody who you paid on the internet to do it for you or something like that. That's not going to get you in. It has to be genuinely you.
Yeah, Louisa, I want to add on to that. I know, when you write a letter, obviously you really want it to be about yourself, but something that I've heard, sitting in on some different interviews at our school, when an applicant leaves, we'll always talk about the applicant. And I've heard people say before, man, that person, I just felt like they were robotic, or that they were just saying exactly what we wanted to hear rather than actually saying, who they are and what they actually feel about it. And I think that's one of the big downfalls that some people will do. You just really have to, speak, what you feel and not what we want to hear. So it's the same with writing. Don't have someone else write it yourself. Write, how you would write it.
And let me add on to writing your personal statement. I honestly feel like you should brainstorm before you actually sit down and write it. Think about key questions that you want to answer. Think about how, if you were sitting on the other end reading this personal statement about this applicant, what do you want to learn about this applicant that would be like, hey, you know what, this person's, stands out and I want to accept them into my program, or I want to interview them. Definitely write something that's unique to you. Definitely brainstorm, bring in ideas, and there's going to be a whole bunch of experience that we may have had, some stronger than others. And sometimes we can start writing our essay about an experience that we had, and we're like, you know what, there's actually a better experience that I've had that, you know, can help me write a better story. So definitely brainstorm and start your process early. Like if you know that the application is going to open in May, like start brainstorming your personal statement now and have, you know, the people that know you. Like I had my sibling and my closest friends actually read it because they knew me best. They kind of were there for my whole process. So I would say definitely have people that know you read it. Okay, this question here goes, I've been told that a committee letter replaces a science letter from a professor. Is this true?
So it kind of depends on the school. I would definitely check into that with admissions. So I took kind of like a gap year and did a master's. And when the first time I applied, I had like the different rec letters. So I had 3 different ones and then one from a dentist. But then the second time I applied, I asked my master's committee to write me the rec letter, and that replaced all 3 of the non-dentist ones. So just check up on the schools that you are like most set on applying to. If you're applying to all like 60, don't go calling all 60, but the ones that you are most interested in, and then try to see like what their policies on it are. My understanding is that for every school that I applied to, those 3 letters were replaced with that committee letter. But yeah, that was just my experience. So definitely check on that.
This person writes, the dentist I am shadowing asked me to write my own letter of recommendation. How do you do that? Has anyone had experience with it?
I thank goodness have not personally, but I have heard that it happens before. I mean, it's a good idea because you get to write what you want to have shown about you. So all the achievements that you have experienced through shadowing, all the things that went through your head, you can kind of put on paper, and then the dentist can choose whether or not to keep it in there, right? So they can still edit it, but write a letter that you think portrays who you are, and just kind of, you know, maybe the dentist was really busy and all you were doing is standing next to him or her. And so maybe you didn't have a lot of conversations. So this letter gives you the opportunity to kind of formulate your thoughts. And then, you know, you can talk about it with your dentist. So it's just kind of a stepping stone to make sure that everything's included that you want to have included in that letter.
How long does it take to confirm that ASDA portal has received our the letter of recommendations?
For me, it took about 2 weeks. It was kind of the same time frame as the DAT, like, what's the word for it? They like kind of are making sure that it's turned in and it's valid. So yeah, definitely do it early. And I had issues with mine going back to how big my school was. They had like lines of people asking for these letters because everybody wants letters, especially their science one, from the same professors. So they had almost a month or 2 like wait list to get the letter written. So start making the relationship early, and then start asking early, because you have to wait all of that time plus the time that the application will take to validate it itself. So whatever time you think it's going to take, add like 2 or 3 weeks to that just to be safe.
Yeah, I would almost like to add there, if you know that you're going to have an application coming up and you need some letters, maybe it's a good idea to go to the professor and say, hey, you know, I'm going to be applying to dental school later this year, and maybe in, you know, it's going to be 6 months. I just want to give you a heads up, and maybe we can, you know, plan for that now. So as much heads up as possible really helps them.
And I think,
And oh,
Go for it. Go for it.
Oh, and then also to add to that, it's really important to continue the relationship with your professor. They're humans too, and they want us to succeed. They're all rooting for us. So it's really nice if you send them a quick email saying like, hey, I got my interview date. Like, this is awesome. I'm so excited. And also, once you've been accepted to dental school, send them a quick email just saying like, hey, thank you. You know, your letter got me into dental school and I'm really excited. That just kind of on a human level shows that you also care for the professor, right? You're not just asking them for a favor. You're really here to kind of build a little relationship. You know, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but it's just a respectful thing to do is to keep them updated on how you're doing on your process to get into dental school.
Someone asked, I have heard rumors that ASDA is not accepting or using Interfolio this year. Is it true? For this one, I feel like it's an idea question. Definitely email them, reach out to them. They have support during this time, even though their COVID is happening. So definitely like reach out to ADIA. There are changes every year, but we're not sure if they're not using Interfolio. Like we haven't heard the rumors on our end. If we have a 5th letter of recommendation, can we somehow send it to the schools? And would this be after interviews, or is it possible if the school asks for more info from us? When should, like if we have a 5th one, when and how should we submit it?
Go ahead, Natalie.
I'm like, I haven't talked in a minute. So I would say try to pick 4. I did have 4 individual letters. Try to pick 4, your 4 top ones, but I would think that if you do have a 5th letter that you just can't leave out, maybe contact the dental schools that you're applying to directly and let them know how important or how much you think this letter would impact your application. And if there's somewhere that this 5th person writing your letter can send it directly to. Yeah, I would say do that right after you maybe submit, or maybe before you submit your application, but don't wait till like the interview or something, because I feel like it would make the most impact while they're trying to decide whether to interview you or not.
There's also kind of another way to like play the game of interview season. So if there is a school that you're like really, really set on, say you get waitlisted after the interview, or they like haven't made a decision on your application yet, say you mail in a rec letter, or you like submit it via email or something, when they see your name come through their system again, it kind of like sparks a little something, rather than a student that they may not have like heard from, or like it just shows that you're interested, and that's what they want to see when they're going through their wait list. Obviously they want people that are going to commit to fill those spots. They don't want another person that's just gonna like accept and then go to a different school. So if it's something that you think would increase your interview chances, definitely send it before the interview like Natalie said. But then say you interview, you get waitlisted, you're like really, really set on that school, then don't hesitate to send it then. So like things like letters of intent, or like even a 5th rec letter, that's an option too.
Yeah, Siri, I'd like to add on to that. You made a good point. I think that persistency, just being persistent is really key. You know, if it's a school you really want to go to, call them up, check to see how it's going, maybe even go to the school and see if you can get an extra meeting or something. The more that they see you, the more that they see your name, really the better chance that you have of getting in. So if you really want to get into that school, just be persistent.
Okay, Natalie, there's this question specific for you. This person asks, you applied 4 times. What kind of updates did you include in your personal statement? Did you change it completely? And what kind of improvements did you do during your gap years?
So each time I applied, I just wrote a brand new personal statement from scratch. I tried to reference my previous ones, but I did talk about things that I've done since applying the previous times. But I kind of took like a new direction with it. I came from a different perspective. And then let's see, I wouldn't say I changed it completely. What kind of improvements did I do during my gap years? So I graduated from my undergrad in 2012, which seems forever ago now. I just took one class between then and getting into dental school. I took a cadaver anatomy course just to kind of make sure I still had what it took to be in school. And I worked a lot in the dental field. I was a dental assistant. I got promoted to office manager, and I was the lead of this program that went to different elementary schools and provided preventative care. And then I really upped my game on community service. Like I became obsessed with volunteering at local clinics, and then like the yearly Mission of Mercy. So the more and more I did that and the more work experience I had, gave me more things to talk about in my personal statement.
How should you talk about dental volunteering on a mission trip or another country? Should you say you just observed even if you did more?
I get to kind of talk about that. I had a little similar situation. I actually also went abroad, and that's kind of how I fell in love with dentistry. And so that was my hook for my personal statement. So there is a very specific moment that I talked about, that kind of the aha moment of why dentistry. And so if you went on a mission trip and you volunteered and that's the reason why you're choosing dentistry, I think it's a completely valid point to build your personal statement on that. Now, if that's just kind of a supplemental thing that you do or you did, you can add it as part of your experiences in your ASDA application. And then you can talk about, where you did it, why you did it, how long. No, it says, should you say that you observed even if you did more? No, right? Different countries have different rules. Even though maybe in the US it might be difficult for pre-dents to do anything hands-on, other countries are different. And so you should just be honest about what you did. Yeah.
When asking a professor for a letter of recommendation, what personal information should we provide?
So my professors asked for my transcript and then personal statement, and then each of them had kind of like, because they've been doing this for so long, they have like their own kind of template thing, and then they just asked to meet again. Like we had already been building this relationship, but they asked for kind of like a more formal sort of meeting before they started writing it. So they just had like maybe 8 or 9 questions of just like, okay, so why do you want to be a dentist kind of things. So they could talk about more of that sort of stuff other than just how they'd gotten to know me. So just ask, it doesn't hurt to ask, just email them and say like, what kinds of things do you want from me? Because it could be different for everyone. Like maybe they want something else that you didn't think of. So just email.
And then Sarah and Trent, I think this question is best for you guys. For Midwestern's English requirement, does writing literature or writing intensive social science courses fulfill that requirement? Do you guys know?
Honestly, I have no idea, but our admissions director is like super, super nice, and the whole admissions department is really on top of their game. So honestly, if you just call them tomorrow, I'm sure they would give you a straight answer, because everyone's they're available to be reached even though they're not in the office. But yeah, I have no idea. I'm sorry.
I think we know a lot about the science courses, but like anything that's like math or beyond, like English, we're like, let's see. Would it be acceptable to ask a letter of rec from a math teacher? For this one, like we mentioned before, I feel like it's best if you ask for a science recommendation letter, just because that's what most schools would require. So you don't want to use up your quota on your ADSAS application, because there's only so many slots that you can submit your letter of rec to.
Yeah, I want to add to that real quick. I'll share what mine were. I had a committee letter, and that was, I had 3 different professors for a master's program I did, and they were all hard sciences. So that counted as one, and that fulfilled like that requirement. And then I reached out. I had one other undergrad professor I had a dentist, someone that I knew really well, and I actually had, there was four. I had my high school coach, and I thought that it kind of threw in something different, even though I don't think it was required or anything. I wanted to show a little bit of different perspective about my personality. So I had my hard sciences there, but I added a little bit something else as well.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. So since I was non-traditional, I specifically reached out to the schools that I had narrowed down that I wanted to apply to ask them, hey, are these types of letters okay? I haven't been in school in however many years now. Luckily, I did still have a good relationship with my biology professor, but that was from 2008 when I was a freshman at a community college. They did accept that. And then another one was my dental assisting teacher. And then obviously the dentist I worked with, and then a dentist that was the head of a volunteer clinic I was at. So I think it just comes down to contacting the schools and finding out their requirements. Obviously, everyone's probably going to want at least one science professor, but then if your math professor or someone else that knows you really well can speak for you, I would definitely get that letter if it's going to be accepted by the schools.
Okay, let's see. Someone asked, my personal statement is less than 4,500 characters, but it doesn't fit on one page exactly. Could you explain that part again? I think, Louisa, you were talking about that.
I'm just trying to figure out if it's less than a page or more than a page. But I assume it's more than a page.
Yeah, it's more than a
doesn't fit
page.
on one page exactly. I mean, the professor that I talked to at UNLV before I applied said, get that thing to fit on one Word document, whatever you do. So, and not by making the font smaller. So I did go back. I wish I could see how many characters mine ended up being, but it was definitely less than 4,500. And I think that's okay. I don't think it has to be, you know, sometimes you want to max out the number of words that you can just to get, you know, something extra out of it. I don't think that that's necessary. Make your point short, concise, and I mean, think about it. These professors have to read, I don't know, thousands of these, right? So just get your point across in a concise manner, and then it shouldn't really matter how many characters you have. I would personally stick to the rule of keeping it on one page. I hope that answers.
And then someone asked about how does application due date? What exactly is the application due date?
I can pull up the DO real quick.
I think it's not until something like February 1st of next year, but do not wait past like the summer. Even August, honestly, is like if you have a reason to wait, if you're taking summer courses and you want those in your transcript and you want those to show up, by all means do it in August. But if you are ready to go submit that thing June 1st, I think it's still June 1st that it opens, but whatever day it's due, you're allowed to open it before and fill it all out. So as soon as that day rolls around, just hit submit.
Yeah, and I think different schools have different set deadlines. Like I know one of the schools I applied to, their deadline is as early as like October 1st or something. But I'm pretty sure most, if not all, schools are on like a rolling application cycle. So it's like they're not going to wait for all the applications to get there and like compare them. It's like as they get them in, they're like, oh, this person looks good. This person looks good. So yeah, like Siri said, submit it ASAP. I think this most recent one, when I applied, I had everything submitted by mid-July. So yeah, there are deadlines, but try to do it as soon as possible.
Let me add on to that. So when I was applying, I think what people in dental school have told me was it depends on what kind of applicant you are. And it depends on how strong of an applicant you are. If you have average grades and your DAT is average per se, I was told that you don't want to apply June 1st. And that's because all the strong applicants who have strong background in everything that they do is submitting at that time. So when you submit during that time, you're going to look average if you normally don't. Versus if you wait out a month and they've looked at all the really, really amazing applicants with like 4.5s on their GPA, then, then you'll start looking normal, like the rest of the people who are like, oh, look, hey, we're doing well, we're 3.5, 3.7, 3.9, whatever it is, so there is, it depends on what school and how they're doing it. So really it's a guessing game. But yeah, I think to a certain extent, it matters if you apply early or not, but definitely don't apply late.
Yeah, as a reminder, I mean, December 1st, people get accepted and schools want to fill their seats. It's a business for them as well. So definitely don't wait too long.
So DET preparation, and when is it the latest that it can be sent?
So with everything going on with COVID, I feel like schools will be a little bit more lenient with getting those scores in. So if you know that you are going to be taking it in the future, I say submit your application and then just like contact the school. They love communication. They don't like just things missing without knowing why. So just tell them like, hey, this is what happened. I know this one question says that their test is being canceled until May 31st. So just tell them that, like, everybody knows what's going on. It's not like this is like a secret. So they're gonna be more accommodating than you think.
Mm-hmm. And then someone asked, when you are planning to reapply to schools, what should you do in the meantime to make your application stronger? And also, do you recommend getting a master's degree if you didn't get in the first time? Did anyone do a master's program?
Yeah, Siri and I, we both did master's programs. So, I think it really depends on your application. If you're lacking in grades, for myself, I was lacking in a GPA. It wasn't very high. So I did a master's to really show that, I could obtain a high GPA. So if that's what you're lacking in, then a master's can be really good. I think if you're lacking in community service, or if you're lacking in spending time at dental clinics and actually showing that this is really what you want to do, then that's what you need to be doing rather than a master's degree. So I think it just really depends on your own application.
And the worst thing you can do is do something because you think it's what they want you to do. Don't do research because you think they want you to do research. If you hate research, don't do it. I really don't like research. I never did research. And if you really don't want to get a master's, don't get a master's. Do something else that you think will make your application stand out. And it's something that you can talk about positively in your interview.
Let's see. Anyone have anything that they want to add? We have about 2 minutes left.
I'll add something. I think for me, one of the toughest part about going through this journey is figuring out whose advice do I take seriously and what is just an opinion of a person. And so, us 5 are up here and we've kind of gone through that, and this is our personal story, but that does not mean that that's your story. Right. And so I don't want anyone leaving this webinar thinking like, oh my gosh, I didn't do XYZ because they all talked about it, but I don't have that. Don't freak out. Like if we were all identical people trying to get into identical schools, it would be a mess, right? We want to be individuals. And so I think that's really important to remember, is that the right thing will happen to you, and just stick with what you're doing. Right. And of course, there's a couple of guidelines to follow that are good to have, like you have to have a certain amount of letters of rec and so on, but just go your own journey, right? Because it's going to be the right one. So take all the advice with a grain of salt.
And don't listen to anything that you see on Student Doctor Network. I feel like that's the biggest advice I can give you guys. I remember looking through that thing and just being like so demoralized, thinking like all these people had 4.0s. People lie all the time on there, or they give advice that they didn't even follow. And whatever you think is true on there, don't listen to it. Listen to people that you can trust.
I'd like to just add, it's a hard process getting into dental school. And so, don't get discouraged if at first you don't get in, or you hit roadblocks along the way. There's always a way to get into dental school. So geez, all of us up here, we all have different stories, applying more than one time, masters, all different types of ways that we got in. The common thing we all have is we kept going to get in. So just really don't get discouraged if you don't get in the first time. If you keep being persistent, it will happen.
Anyways, so our time is up. Thank you, pre-dentals, for joining us today. We really enjoyed answering these questions, and we do wish you luck on your application process. If you haven't started on your personal statement yet, start now. And if you haven't requested your letter of recs yet, email your professors and email them now. Thank you. Have a wonderful night, you guys.